Right now, this dialogue around a basic income, it's been a discussion point, I think, for a lot of people when we've been looking at attacking poverty for a number of years. It kind of sat on the fringe, and people have been trying to build the case up for it and trying to get governments to give it a go to see whether or not it'll work, sort of thing. We had here in the province a small pilot project that was going on. The plug was pulled on that by the current government, and a lot of people were frustrated. A lot of people were frustrated, saying, "Look, at this, we finally got this thing on the go. We were going to start to see, some of the data that could come back from this, and that would go a long way to making the case for or against expanding this type of thing." And then it kind of went off to the wayside. Then we got into this pandemic. Then we've got the CERB that came through, and that kind of helped, I think, spur on more of this discussion as well, because we were starting to see that, hey, boy, there's people who were making less than this, and now we're trying to figure out how to get them back to work because they're making more than they were before. How does that make any sense? So it's been on the periphery, and it's continuing to try to get its way through. And the Niagara Regional Council is, the latest council to put this on the docket, and it came through a committee meeting yesterday, and essentially, it's got to go to the full council, but the idea is going to be calling for a guaranteed income pilot here in Niagara. Joining us on the line this morning, Laura Yip is a regional councillor who will put this thing onto the table. Laura, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm all right. This is, it feels like the elephant in the room every time we talk about poverty. This whole concept and the efficacy and whether or not it would be good, beneficial going forward. It just feels like the obvious thing we got to figure out before we get anywhere else.
Yeah, well, and the two most common sort of concerns, and if you could see me air quoting, are that it's too expensive and that people will be lazy and not work. Now, there's it was decades ago now. It was in 1974. The largest project like this that ever happened was actually here in Canada, and there's been a number of other small ones around the globe. Every single time, the research has shown a negligible sort of impact as far as people deciding to not work. Because a basic income, this is not the lap of luxury, right? You're not sailing away on vacation, those sorts of things. So most people will choose to continue to work because they want to make more than what a basic income would allow them to make. But a basic income means, that you can afford to have a roof over your head. You can afford to put food on the table, nutritious food on the table. That you don't have to maybe worry about childcare. I mean, I asked at yesterday's meeting for Dr. Hergy and Commissioner Jugley to speak to the concept, because it is very real, of being too poor to work. Right? That you don't have enough money coming into your household that you can seek out employment and then worry about being dressed properly for whatever that employment is, getting childcare, having transportation, all of those other factors.
Well, and those kind of underlying pieces is why I'm going to assume it came through, a public health kind of committee instead of somewhere else like this. Yeah. And I think this is where it gets missed. This is a public health issue, poverty, yeah. And this is, this isn't just a simple, finances or something like that. This is deep rooted and it's got all these tentacles that kind of come off it.
Well, and again, any time that any research has been done, it has shown demonstrably that people's health improves, their physical and their mental health, right? So the argument that a basic income program would be too expensive, the argument that it would be expensive, absolutely it would be expensive. I don't think anyone is saying that it wouldn't be. However, the consequences of poverty, use of the healthcare system, policing, the criminal justice system, the whole nonprofit sector as far as housing and food security and all of those things. The cost across Canada, and it was 2013 data, so it's been a while now, was $86 billion nationally. In Niagara, again in 2013, it sat at about $1.4 billion. So a basic income guarantee would very likely mean, and again, research has shown this several times. The problem is they're small research projects, so they don't get sort of as much play, or they aren't considered to be as reliable. Is that the money spent on all of those other things that are the consequences of poverty decreases significantly, right? So I guess, really ultimately the question is, where do you want to put your money? Right? Because you're spending it. It's going somewhere. Where would you prefer it went?
Well, that's the piece that I think those who have been staunchly against even, considering this idea have been missing that, or kind of overlooking the fact that we pay tax dollars. Like, there's tax dollars coming in to these levels of government anyway. And guess where it's going? It's going into all of these different pieces that are basically parts of poverty. And if we can erase it, if it's a one-to-one sort of situation, then you're just looking at it going, saying, would you prefer that somebody was living with a roof over their head, or were we helping them get food and they were scraping by and they were feeling like garbage and weren't really helping them their way up? But I'm going to guess there's probably even an argument that it might not be one-to-one. Like, it might save us money, but we don't know that.
And that's exactly, we don't know that, I guess, well enough. The research that has been done points to it would save us money. But really, this ends up really being a moral issue, right? Because many, many people in the world look at people who are living in poverty and they're not deserving. They've done this to themselves. There's that kind of thinking. And so why should we give them free money? Even if you think that people living in poverty are not deserving or they're not worthy, wouldn't you be interested in saving money ultimately, right? So,
you would think.
So that's the real issue. Is it becomes much more, for many, many people, much more a moral issue than an actual financial one.
Absolutely. So what did the committee? The committee is basically endorsing this idea of calling on the province to create a pilot project here.
Yeah, essentially. So we've basically said, and in light of CERB, right? Because what happened there, I think what happened as far as bringing a lot of these issues to light is we weren't looking at people who are typically living in poverty. Now it was people who, they put real hard work into earning a living, and they were out of jobs, right, because of the pandemic. So, the federal government decides $2,000 a month, which I haven't even seen any basic income figures that have looked at an amount that high. But they said $2,000 a month is how much you need to get through this pandemic. So we basically said, I think mainly to the provincial or to the federal government, but we included the provincial government as well, because should they wish to do so, they absolutely could do this for Ontario. Acknowledge that poverty has all of these impacts on the social determinants of health. Study what the CERB has done. Study, what a basic income could do. The motion did not call for the federal government to immediately implement a basic income program across the country. It called for, studies and pilot programs and that sort of thing. And then, essentially, the motion came forward, and Councillor Nicholson in Niagara Falls said, well, if we're going to ask them to do a pilot project, why are we not asking them to do it in Niagara? Which, of course, I considered a friendly amendment. Absolutely, if you're going to do it here, right? Especially when you're looking at our unemployment numbers and all of the other things, all of the other ways that we're impacted here in Niagara.
I think for some people out there, Laura, they might be saying, what the heck is this going to matter? You're basically just sending a piece of paper to the feds, and they're going to do what they want to do anyway.
Yeah, and you know what? There's absolutely some validity to that. I don't think for a second that Prime Minister Trudeau or Premier Ford are getting a letter from Niagara and going, oh, well, if Niagara says we should do it, then we should do it. But I don't think that there's any harm in adding our voice to all of the voices that have been communicating these kinds of things. I mean, this motion from yesterday came about because the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit, they sent a letter to the feds and I think they actually only sent it to the feds, and said, look, here are all the reasons that you need to look at transitioning the CERB into a basic income. So originally my motion in June was to just endorse the Simcoe letter.
Okay.
But it was referred back for a staff report. And, I mean, Dr. Hergy and Commissioner Jugley, as they always do, I guess it's open to It's a matter of opinion, maybe. But they provided us with a very comprehensive report, including outlining a number of other projects that have or are happening in the world. This is a program that is supported across the political spectrum, and they all have different reasons. But I don't care what the reasons are.
Yeah.
Right? Ultimately, if everybody is supporting it, this is a good thing. I don't care if the Conservatives are saying, oh, but it would save us money on other programs. Absolutely, it would. That's as good a reason as any to help people get out of poverty.
Well, and that's even I know there's no political parties on regional council, but we kind of know where in the spectrum most people sit.
Yeah.
But watching it, it's like, okay, maybe there'll be some objections. Like, no, everybody was kind of on board. There was one councillor who was off in the woods there for a second. But for the most part, I'm like, okay, no, everybody's kind of pushing. I'm like, that's a good thing to see. When you can see that, I think you can understand that it's the validity of it is getting kind of pushed up a little bit more.
Yeah, and again, when you're seeing that kind of agreement from people who quite often disagree on a number of different things, and again, for all different reasons, when they're all agreeing. I'll be honest, I didn't think it was going to pass.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I did not go into yesterday's meeting thinking it was going to pass. Again, never mind be unanimous. We even saw the one councillor who said that all of these social issues are not poverty, but because of family breakdown, he was going to vote against it and ended up voting in favor and indicating that his mind had been changed because of the discussion.
Which is what we asked for, right? Is being
Exactly.
open to that kind of stuff. Yeah, keeping the mind open. So this will go to the full council next week, right?
Yeah, and I don't anticipate there being any problem. I think there were, with the unanimous vote yesterday, there were enough of them, and sort of knowing who is not on that committee and how they might vote. I can't even imagine anybody's going to lift this. I think it'll just go through it when we ratify.
We get to see how, as long, and I think that's the thing, is sure we can't expect the government to say, oh, Niagara said something, but it's adding that voice, it's adding that discussion, and I think kind of furthering the dialogue within communities that it will kind of continue to garner more steam on a federal scale.
Well, and because we can't solve poverty by ourselves at the region.
No.
So let's ask for some help.
Absolutely. Before I let you go, we were worried you might not finish up a meeting. You were bringing up some governance conversations. I always love that. How did that go today?
Oh, it was a bit of a wild ride this morning.
Oh, was it? Okay. Obviously, I didn't get a chance to see it. Can you give me the Cole's notes then?
Cole's notes. In February, I brought direct election of the regional chair. Council said, oh, we shouldn't be dealing with just one single item. Let's have a whole bunch. So I brought another motion last month, trying to include all the things they wanted included. And this morning's discussion was, there's too many things on the list. And we were elected to make these decisions. We don't need to involve citizens. So it failed. And it failed.
Okay, so what?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It was a wild ride.
So essentially, the discussion around electing a regional chair went nowhere again.
Exactly. Well, no, it didn't just go nowhere. So it failed. And a number of my colleagues said, we were elected to make these decisions. We don't need to engage citizen committees. People don't care. Wow. Even though we made such a stink the last time around. Well, and this is the other thing, because one of my questions on that list was like, hey, let's ask citizens and a public consultation process as well, how we can see a more diverse council. And a number of my colleagues said, we saw lots of people run last time. Right? That wasn't because they felt necessarily welcome in municipal politics. That was because there was so much corruption that a number of people came out of the woodwork to do something.
Oh, dear.
So, yeah, wild ride.
Awesome. I'm going to have to go back and watch a little bit of this because it's been a bug. I've been sitting and I've been watching it every once in a while. I'll bring it back up. It's like, can we just get this done? How are we not doing this? Like all the discussion we've had, and somehow it keeps going on deaf ears. I don't understand that. Laura, we'll follow that up another time, but this segment we're running out of time. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Take care. There is Laura Yip, regional councillor here in Niagara, where we'll hear the crux of the living wage thing, not the living wage, sort of the universal basic income piece is that they've agreed on a committee level to play and send a letter to the government to say, look, we're supportive of this, and adding names to the conversation. And I think that's appreciative of understanding. Look, no letter from a regional councillor is going to make a government government change, put in a big program and a big social change like that. But if it can be added to the list of other municipalities and other groups that have been calling for it, then you start to make that voice louder and get that dialogue out there in the community, and understanding that, look, there's a lot of validity to the positives that could be done by putting in something like this, by putting in